Welcome back. This will be our last video for chapter 3. We're going to stick with our same data set and we are going to make a box and whisker plot out of this set of data. So before we can make the box and whisker plot, we first need to calculate our 5-number summary. This consists of the min, right? The minimum value, our Q1, our Q2, which is our median. We talked about how to calculate the median before, Q3, and our maximum value. So let's start with our minimum and our maximum, right? Those are pretty straightforward. Our minimum value is 1. Our maximum value is 80. Our Q2, our median is what we'll start with next when calculating the 5-number summary. Remember the Q1 is the number that cuts off the first 25% of your data. It leaves 75% above. Q3 is kind of the opposite of that, right? It has 75% of your data, so the majority of your data below it, and only 25% above it. To find those, we're going to first find the median, which cuts our data set exactly in half. And then we're going to treat those two halves kind of as their own individual data sets, right? So we'll find the median for the first half, which will give us 25%, or I'm sorry, half of that data set below and half above, right? But half of our data set will be 25% below of our entire data set, which will be our Q1. And we'll do the same thing on the upper side, the larger data set with Q3. And that median will give us our Q3. So let's start by finding our Q2. And all we're going to do is try to find the number right in the middle of this data set that cuts it in half. So to do that, I'm just going to start marking these numbers off one at a time from the beginning to the end until I get to the very middle. And we will either be left with one number or we'll be left with two numbers. We're left with one number. That number itself is our median. And if we're left with 2, we've done this before, we'll have to add those two numbers together and divide by 2 to find our median. And it looks like we're going to be left with one number, which is 20. And if you're left with one number in the middle, you should have the same number of data points on each side of this. So just to make sure, right, we didn't miss anything or double cross anything out, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we had 12 numbers on this side, which makes sense. And we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 numbers above it. So that makes sense, 12 below and 12 above. So this number splits this data set in half. Okay, so now let's treat this piece as its own kind of data set just for a minute, and this piece as its own data set. Notice we're ignoring the 20, which is the median itself, right? It is not included in either data set. Notice if we had two numbers left over and we added them, divided by 2, we would have included those last two numbers in each of these data sets when calculating the Q1 and Q3, because those numbers themselves were not the actual median, right? We're just excluding the median from both of these data sets. Okay, so I don't think I can erase, but I'll just do this same process here. And now I'm left with an even number of data points, right, in this data set and in this one. So I believe I will get two numbers left over at the end. Let's see if I'm right. So now I'll just make a whole X for each one of these numbers. We're currently finding our Q1, and I am. Okay, so I'm left with, oh, hang on, did I do something wrong? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops, I did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the two numbers I'm left with are 9 and 11, right? If I cancel out 1 and 15, and then 4 and 14. Oh, I skipped 5. 5 and 12, and then 6 and 11, and then this 8 and this 11. I'm left with 9 and 11. So to find Q1, we take 9 plus 11, divide that by 2. That is equal to 20. Divide by 2 is equal to 10. Okay, so let's do the same thing. I'll try to be a little more careful this time. On this side, just cross out the lower and the upper. Okay, so I'm left with 29 and 31. So we can, again, add 29 plus 31. Divide that by 2. 29 plus 31 is 60. Divide that by 2 is 30. All right, so now let's quickly find our IQR, right? Because remember, we'll use our IQR to determine if we have any outliers, which is something we want to annotate or show on our box plot. So the IQR is just Q3 minus Q1. So this equals 30 minus 10. And this is 20. Next, we'll see if there are any lower outliers. And to do that, we will take our Q1 we can get it. Okay, that's a Q1. Let's subtract 1.5. We'll multiply that by our IQR. Right, so Q1 is 10 minus 1.5. times the IQR, which is 20. So 1.5 times 20, let's see, that should be 30. Double check, 1.5 times 20 is 30. So 10 minus 30 is negative 20, right? And the negative here is very important. So basically, we would say we had lower outliers or outliers on the lower side of our data set, the smaller side, if any values in our data set were less than this cutoff of negative 20. And we do not have any values, right? Less than 0, right? We have no negative numbers. So we have no lower outliers. So now let's do the same thing, but for upper outliers. This will be Q3 now plus that same 1.5 times the IQR. Okay, so Q3 is 30. And we have already calculated this piece inside the parentheses, right? The 1.5 minus the 1.5 multiplied by 20. That itself was also 30. So 30 plus 30 is equal to 60. So if we have any values greater than 60, 60, then we will call those outliers, right? And we have two values in our data set. If we go back to our data set up here, 66 and 80 are both greater than 60, 60. Not sure if that's making it clearer. So these two values are outliers. So we're going to denote those on our box plot. And also the whisker, that means the whisker will be at 50 instead of at 80. Okay, so let's draw our number line for our box plot. We'll start at 0. Let's go by tens. 20. Need to find a better way to do this. 60, 70, 80, and we'll go all the way up to 90. Okay, so let's start by drawing our box. Remember, we're going to start our box at Q1, which is at 10. So I'll just draw a vertical line at 10, sorry. Okay, should be at 10. Ignore this. And then we'll close our box off at Q3, which is at 30. So this makes our box. And then remember, inside of our box, I got lucky here. We want to show what our median or our Q2 is. Our Q2, which is our median, is actually at 20, right? So there's our median. So now we've got our box, which is great. Now we're going to draw lines out to our min and our max, unless there are outliers, right? We have no minimum outliers. We have nothing less than -20. So I'm going to draw a line out to 1, just slightly above 0, right? And draw this little line. We can call it a whisker. This is our minimum value of 1. And now before I draw that on the upper side, I'm going to denote our outliers, right? Which we've calculated our upper outliers are 66. So somewhere right around here. You can draw them as circles, as X's, really whatever you'd like. I'll do somewhat little circles. So we have an outlier at 66, right, and at 80. So our next highest value is this 50. So I'm going to draw our whisker at 50, and that is where I will draw my line. So that is a box and whisker plot, as well as a 5-number summary for the same set of data. And that concludes chapter 3.